It's good to be with you. I am doing some reading in Mark Noll's book, America's God. And it's a really good book if you haven't read it. I've been listening to it some at a job I do in town here, kind of some light woodwork, that kind of stuff. And just have it on in the background, and yeah, it's been really informative, really good. A little bit of chapter 18, and just see kind of if you have any thoughts, and if not, that's fine too. I'm kind of book a little bit at a time, so you should be able to see what I have in front of me, the text there, and I just have excerpts from chapter 18, which is the Bible alone and a Reformed literal hermeneutic. And I saw on Amazon, I was reading one of the reviews, and one of the guys said that this was probably the most important chapter. And I think a lot of them are pretty important, but I checked it out, and it is a pretty significant chapter for his overall thesis, and for just in terms of interest, I think, as well. So let's dive in here. I'm just kind of go through some of the excerpts, read and comment. If anyone has anything to add, that would be great. The first one here is, here it may be suggested that among a wealth of inherited Protestant practices, trust in Scripture was the one best suited to the circumstance of the early Republic. Reliance on the Bible was a principle that could be easily democratized. And this is really important for his overall thesis, is that the Bible alone, and the Bible being interpreted alone by individuals, corresponds to the efforts made to separate America from Britain, from the motherland, so to speak. And so there's kind of a direct correspondence. It's like the more you focus on Bible alone, the more the people are equipped to resist the mothership, Great Britain. So the next is religiously considered reliance on the Bible alone meant those who had experienced life-transforming conversion could move immediately to proclamation or even itineration with formal institutional or denominational approval. And this is another one that's really interesting, because you think about American development at this time period. The 19th century, you're moving westward, and you don't have access to institutions, you don't have these connections. You're pioneers, you're moving out, and you need something you can take with you, and you don't need a whole lot of connection to back east. And so it also makes sense as well that would develop in terms of this push to move westward. By the 1770s, criticism of other authorities that earlier Protestants had accepted alongside Scripture was becoming more pronounced. And this is interesting, because if you look at what Noll says earlier, he starts with Jonathan Edwards, right? And so the Puritans, they had these other authorities. They had catechisms and creeds and their own kind of religious tradition that they looked to. And by the 1770s, even these kind of earlier authorities were starting to be criticized by some, and it's starting to become a bit more of an extreme principle, I suppose. He says, after the Revolution, Bible-onlyism emerged with great force, in contrast to the late colonial period, when professions to follow just the Scriptures had been a staple of heterodox exegesis practiced by liberals. Now the appeal to Scripture alone was was closely linked closely to traditional theological orthodoxy. I find this really fascinating because in the past, today we often assume that people who are, really fixated or really focused on, the scriptures alone tend to be fundamentalists or more conservative types. But at that period in time, this, the narrow vision form of looking at the text, reading it yourself, was more associated with heterodox or with liberal positions, and it wasn't necessarily a staple of the Orthodox folks. But now it's starting to become so, and this again is another one of the ideas that he has throughout the book, is that America is unique in that they combine these things that were not combinable elsewhere for a lot, and very fascinating. Here he talks about tract, daring any defender of infant baptism to find anything but non-scriptural support for such practices. So it became more reduced, and so anything that wasn't totally explicit in Scripture was sort of considered, it wasn't essential, that type of thing. And so like infant baptism, sacraments, that kind of stuff kind of went out the window in terms of the public debate. Each congregation, each church still did their own thing, but it wasn't kind of this part of their tradition. So with the freedom, it was the duty of all to abandon tradition, prejudice, or systematical myths, to flee the absurdity of trusting ancient inherited religious authorities in order to find the plain truth of the Bible. And so here again, you can think of them kind of casting off, the traditions, religious traditions from folks that you see the correspondence there between the revolution, the spirit of the revolution, to kind of cast off the oversight of another political authority. And here it's like cast off the authorities of previous religious authorities as well. So this fellow Rush, he perceived this bond between Scripture over against the authorities and Republican government over against other political systems. So there you have it. There's kind of that comparison of those two things. And he ardently promoted this in the years that followed. Here again, a fellow says, many are Republicans as to government, and are yet half Republicans, being struggling right now. Let me just see if it's still up and running. It might be. Still kind of new to this, so I'm not sure it's working well or not. If someone is watching right now, let me know how the stream is, because okay, I'm getting an error right now that YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. So how do I fix this? Just let me. Hey, Frida. I might add a different. Here, I end this back in a minute or two here.